Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to Parsha Insights. And this is it feels like our first session of the year, but really it's our first session after an extended summer break, and it's actually our last session of the year in a technical sense. And we are very fortunate because of the way that Yontiv falls out this year, that we can basically continue studying Parsha moving forward with no interruptions for the holidays, because the holidays are stacked at the beginning of the week. We gather on Thursdays. So it is clear sailing for us to join together. Um, there are some exciting plans in place at Shar HaShamayim for new adult education opportunities. Rabbi Mark Fishman is our new director of adult learning, and we'll be hearing a lot from him, including perhaps one or two guest appearances together with me. And other circumstances in this time slot and others. So we have a lot of Torah study ahead of us, and we're going to jump right into it today. As soon as I open the document, here we go. We're starting with Parsha. We're going to do one brief thing from Nitzavim and one brief teaching connected to Rosh Hashana. We are sticking with the theme of Midrash, and that will stick with at least until the new Torah reading cycle, until after Simchas Torah, and then we'll revisit how we're going to approach each parasha with a unique angle. But here we're looking at Midrash, and so we're going to look very simply at the first pasuk, at the very first verse of our Torah portion. Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem. You are standing here today. You stand this day, all of you, kulchem, lifnei Adonai Elohechem, before the Lord your God. And then we're going to enumerate who is standing. Roshechem, from the word Rosh, like Rosh Hashana, your heads, your tribal heads. Shivtechem, Roshechem Shivtechem, your tribal heads, let's put together. Ziknechem, your Zikanim, your elders. Vishotrechem, we've seen this a few parshiot ago in Parshat Shoftim. Vishotrechem, your officials. Kol Ish Yisrael, every household of the people of Israel, every householder of Israel. Tapchem Neshechem, your children, your wives. V'gercha asher b'kerev machanecha, and the stranger within your camp. The Hebrew word ger today meaning a convert in biblical times, meaning someone from outside the camp, from outside the people. Mechotev etzecha, from the wood chopper, ad shoev memecha, until the one who draws the water. Okay, and I saw there are a number of comments as to why we're choosing from wood chopper to water drawer. What's the symbolism of wood? What's the symbolism of water? And a compelling commentary said that chotev etzecha are the people who work really hard. Those are the schleppers. And the shoev memecha, the water drawers, was seen as a little bit of lighter labor, not as intensive labor. So you're going from these to those. It's being just being inclusive. That's the whole idea of this verse. Everyone is standing in front of you. There's a number of questions one could ask about this verse, including redundancy. And what is this Kol Ish Yisrael, every household in Israel? Usually when you say the word Kol, everyone, who is this coming to include? Who is this referring to? What's the purpose of each of these categories? This is coming right after the curses that we read about in last week's Torah portion in Ki Tavo. We read about the blessings and the curses. And so one Midrash says that this statement is a statement for how Israel responds to curses and responds to challenges. Atem nitzavim, you are standing tall, you are standing firm. Even when the curses come, you're still, at the end of the day, you're still going to be standing. Why are you going to be standing tall? Because lifnei Hashem Elokechem, because you're going to be before the Lord your God, because you're going to always have that connection that allows you to stand tall. Rashi on this, and please, as always, please jump in with any questions or comments. But Rashi on this verse says, "Melamed shekinsam Moshe lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu biyom oto lachnisam bivrit." Moshe is assembling everyone together on the day of his death. We're almost at the end of the Torah, in order to initiate them into a covenant with him, because the next verses all talk about the covenant, the covenant, the covenant. So that's kind of the very simple presentation of what's happening in our Torah portion. Everyone gets together for Moshe to initiate the covenant and to remind them of their responsibilities. That's it. Very simple. The Midrash has some more fun with this. But before we get to the Midrash, a little bit of a backstory having to do with Joshua and leading the people into Israel and the warning of what happens when they conquer the land, not to take spoils from a particular place. And there's somebody named Achan. Achan. Anyone familiar with Achan? Have you heard of this character, Achan? He's a rebellious character who takes spoils against the instructions. So we'll read very quickly. This is just a little bit of background information before we get into the Midrash. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, pay honor to the Lord, the God of Israel, make confession to him, tell what you have done, don't hold anything back. And Achan said, yes, it's true, I have sinned against the Lord. This is what I did. I saw among the spoil a fine Shinar mantle, 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold weighing 50 shekels. I coveted them and took them. They are buried in the ground in my tent with the silver under it. Again, people were not supposed to take the spoils of war. Achan couldn't help himself. This is what he did. And Joshua sent messengers who hurried to the tent. There it was, the silver. They brought Joshua, all the Israelites, they displayed them before God. And lest you think that Achan now is going to get off easy because he confessed his sin, it's not so simple. He's going to be punished pretty severely. Then Joshua, they take Achan the son of Zerach, and the silver, the mantle, and the wedge of gold, his son and daughters, his ox, his ass, his flock, his tent, all the belongings. They brought them up to Emek Achor, and Joshua said, look what you've done to us, the calamity, the Lord will be calamity. All of Israel pelted him with stones. They put them to the fire and stoned them. Who's them? Them is his sons and daughters, his ox, his ass, and his flock, and his tent, and all his belongings. So Achan sinned, but the whole household is punished. They raised a huge mound of stones over him, which is still there. The anger subsided. That's why the valley is named the Valley of Achor, as is still the case. And then one later verse in Joshua, when Achan, the son of Zerach, violated the proscription to not take the spoils, anger struck the whole community of Israel. He was not the only one who perished for that sin. So that's it. That's your presentation of Achan. And that's what we need to know. Achan was a good soldier who turned bad, who became selfish, who took the spoils of war against the instructions of Moshe and of God, of Yoshua and of God, and he was punished, and his whole family was punished along with him. One way to remember, I'm sharing this really apropos nothing, but it's something that's in my mind anytime I see Achan, is you're familiar with the Aleinu prayer. Aleinu l'shabeach. You know the second paragraph of the prayer. Al kein nekave lecha Hashem Elokeinu. Therefore we hope to you, we turn to you, God. Al kein nekave is the acronym of those words is Achan. Al kein nekave. I think about that every time I say Aleinu. Al kein nekave. Therefore we turn to you, we hope to you, God. So that is Achan, the person who takes the spoils of war against an illegal act and is severely punished. Now let's go back to our parasha. Any questions? Concerns?
What's the difference between Vayirgamu, Vayiskalu? It's the same.
Vayirgamu and Vayiskalu. So that's a great question. I don't know. Between the verb, they're both having to do with stones. I don't have the answer to that, but that's an excellent question. Thank you. And you know, the only thing I'm noticing, Vayirgamu Even, right? It's kind of the object. Vayirgamu, no, the direct object is Oto. They stoned him, Kol Yisrael Even, so it's implied here with a stone. Vayiskalu Otan, and they stoned them. And the word Vayiskalu is the Hebrew word skila. That's one of the capital punishments in Judaism is skila, is stoning. Ba'avanim, with stones. I don't know. I'm sure there is a good answer to that, but I do not have that good answer, but I'm writing down the question. So in case I come across an answer, I will know who to.
I don't remember coming across that word, Yergamel.
Rabbi,
Yeah,
what is the meaning of Achor?
of Achor. That's a good question.
Yes, because it says that's why that place was named the Valley of Achor.
So there is no direct translation. It is connected to the Hebrew word, which means to rot, to spoil, to go bad. Ikur is something that you imagine something that smells from deterioration. It's not a very positive word, but I don't know that it's meant to even have a direct translation here other than the name of a place. Okay, let's jump into the Midrash. The Midrash, Tanchuma, your tribal leaders, your elders, your law officers, right? So the Midrash says, Kulchem Shavim Lefanai. The reason it lists them all together is to show that they are all equal. As it says, V'chol Ish Yisrael, and every man, every person of Israel. This is meant to show the equality of all of these categories. What does this mean? What is the interpretation? Davar acher. What's another interpretation? Kulchem arevim ze bazeh. You are all responsible for each other. That's a famous phrase. A different formulation is more famous from the Talmud and Tractate Shavuot. Kol Yisrael arevim zel hazeh. We're all responsible for each other. The word arev is a guarantor. It's a legal concept. A guarantor. So arev. Kol Yisrael arevim ze bazeh. We're all responsible for each other. What does that mean? So practically speaking, afilu tzadik echad benechem. Even if there's only one tzaddik, one righteous person, kulchem omdim b'zchuto. Everyone stands in that person's merit. V'lo atem bilvad. And not just you. Don't think it's just talking about you, people who are sitting here in this Zoom room. No. And it's not just talking about the members of Congregation Shar Shema. It's not just talking about the city of Montreal, but rather Kol Ha'olam Kulo, the entire world, Bizchuto Omed, stands in the merit of that righteous person. You want to know how significant being righteous is? You want to know how much you should value and treasure people who are truly righteous? Because, as the verse says, V'tzadik Yesod Olam, a righteous person is the foundation of the world. But there's a flip side to this also. Uke'achad mekem choteh, when one of you sins, kol hador lokeh, the entire generation suffers and is punished. So there is certainly an inherent contradiction in these two concepts, that the world is rewarded if there's one righteous person, but if there's one evil person, then the world is punished. But leave it as it is. And then the Midrash continues. And so you find with Achan, who we just read about. Hello, Achan ben Zarach, but you know that Achan, he committed the embezzlement to not take the loot or the booty of Jericho. If with the measure of punishment, which is small, the whole generation was seized, how much more so? Meaning everyone was punished, how much more so with the measure of the divine favor, which is great. Meaning you're looking at the story of Achan and seeing how one person's act can impact a larger population. And v'lo gedolim shebachem bilvad afilu tapchem. It's not just the impact on adults, but even or on adult males, but even the children, even the women, even the stranger, right? As listed in the Torah. And therefore it says, Kol Ish Yisrael, all the people of Israel, and that's, we'll pause for a moment there. So what the Midrash is saying is, not only is the verse coming to teach me that all the leaders are equal, that God loves everyone equally, but rather to teach the responsibility, the interconnectedness of responsibility that exists within this entire list of the people of Israel, all the way from the top of the hierarchy, from the elders and the officers and the heads of the tribes, all the way down to the schlepper who's pulling up the water from the well, that all of those people have this sense of interconnectedness and are responsible for one another. And the merit of one impacts the rest, and the punishment to one is meted out amongst the rest, or affects the rest. And then the Midrash continues, which I think is a very interesting line. Lefisha basar vadam, the concept, this phrase basar vadam means flesh and blood, literally flesh and blood, and it refers to a human king or humanity in general. We're often talking about a melech basar vadam as a way of teaching us how much more so we should honor God, because if we honor a melech basar, if we honor a king of flesh and blood, so all the more so the melech malchei hamlachim, the king of kings. And here it's not talking about a king, but humanity. And the Midrash says a very interesting point. This Midrash being written, 1,000 years ago. And it's saying the nature of humanity, merachem al hazcharim yoter mehanekevot, favors males over females. The majority of humanity, the natural tendency of humanity, the Midrash says, has compassion, has mercy, protects males more than females. That's the claim of the Midrash a millennia ago. V'hakadosh baruch hu enochem. But God, it's not like that. Ki rachamav al kol ma'asav. His mercy extends to all of his creatures, to everything that God created. Al zcharim v'al nekevot, men and women. Al tzadikim v'al rishayim, righteous and wicked. Shneamar mechotev etzecha ad shoev memecha. From this to that, that's the concept that the Midrash is teaching, that God interacts and encounters each of them with an equal measure of compassion and mercy. Any comments on this Midrash, which has introduced a whole new area of understanding to this verse? The verse was, you're all standing here. That's all the verse said. Everyone's here. And here's your covenant. And what the Midrash says, well, why is everyone here? Why do I need to know this? And why couldn't the Torah just say everyone stood there? Why does it need to enumerate all these different categories of people to show that they're all equal, number one, to show that they're all interconnected, number two, and number three, to show that God has equal compassion on each of them, not only that they're responsible for each other in a human sense, but from a divine perspective, God looks down on all of us as his creations and doesn't differentiate between men and women, doesn't differentiate between other categories as well. Ora.
Yes. How come if one righteous person can save the entire world, one sinner perverts, so to speak, the whole generation? I mean, condemns the whole generation. Isn't it a contradiction in terms?
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Yeah, 100%. They can't coexist. Those two concepts can't coexist. So we could note that, if we look very closely at the language of the Midrash, they're actually not equal language. It says that a righteous person, the world stands in their merit, and for a wicked person, the world is stricken. It uses the word lokeh, which even comes from the Hebrew word for a lash. One imagines like a lash. The world is stricken, but not destroyed. So maybe you can have a world that's existing in the merit of the righteous, but that has individual acts of punishment for those acts of the wicked. I think, if one would look, pull up the text again. So if there's one righteous person, kol ha'olam bizchuto omed. This phrase, bizchuto omed, stands in his merit. But for the wicked person, when a person, it doesn't say, when a person sins, kol hador lokeh. They're all stricken. The whole generation is stricken. So maybe there's an imbalance there which will allow them to coexist. Maybe. Okay, that was our Peter, you gonna say something? No. Okay. That's our midrash on the parsha, and I want to jump to another midrash now, which is one of the rare midrashim. When we're studying midrash, we are this is not a legal text. We're not studying something that's actually giving rise to practical behavioral instructions. Right? That's not. We could sit here and study the Shulchan Aruch. We could study a book of Jewish law. We could study the Talmud, which many sections are revolve around practical application, or how do you get to kind of what we call in Hebrew, Yiddish, you call it tachlis. Let's get down to tachlis. What do you want me to do? Right? Many people are tachlis kind of Jews, that they just want, just tell me what the right thing to do is already. Stop teaching me about achan and about Nitzavim and Midrash. None of this is actually telling me what to do. And we may go back and say, wait a second, I'll tell you what to do, study Torah. And this is Torah that we're studying, so it actually is a practical application. But very rarely does Midrash actually give rise to real customs or real application of Jewish life. But this Midrash is a little bit different. And this Midrash is apropos Rosh Hashana, where we're going to talk about the story of the Akedah, of the binding of Isaac. And I could not find or produce in time a translation for much of this, so you'll have to hang around and we'll look through it. It's pretty straightforward Hebrew. But the Midrash is talking about the journey that Abraham and Isaac and the others who were with them took on the way to Mount Moriah, on the way to the binding of Isaac, on the way to take his son, following God's instruction to take his son up to the altar. So the Midrash says, it wasn't so long from where they were to where from the starting point to the destination. It was not so far. Go take him up to Mount Moriah. Lama nitakev gimel. Why did it take 3 days? What happened? Remember, Abraham got up first thing in the morning. So why did it take him 3 days to get there? Ella. So here's what happened. Kevan shalo shamola satan. Abraham wasn't listening. That Hebrew word satan, Satan. Abraham had no time for satan, for the adversary, for that negative voice to say, don't listen to God. Abraham had no time for him. Halach v'na'asalif nehem kenahar. So Satan went and appeared before Abraham and Isaac and the entourage as a kenahar gadol, like a large river. So Satan turns himself, I don't want to ascribe gender to Satan, himself, herself, itself, Satan's self. Satan turns into a large river. Shelo yuchlu la'avor, that they were not able to pass. Amar Avraham, so Abraham said, Im yordim hana'arim, if the young ones, if the people with me go down, mitya, go into the river, mitya re'ani shema yitba'u, I'm afraid that if they go alone, I'm afraid that they're gonna sink, that they're gonna drown. Yarad, he went down. Amdu lahem hamayim ad savarehem, and the water came up to their neck. They were standing in the water up to their neck. So what's Abraham going to do? He's stuck in the river. The water is up to their neck. He just wants to go to the other side to listen, to fulfill God's commandment. Tala Abraham et einav l'shamayim, so he lifts his eyes to heaven. Amar, and Abraham said, Ribon ha'olami, master of the world, of the universe. Nigleita Allah, you appeared to me. Va'amartali, and you said to me, Ani yachid va'tayachid, that both of us are unique in the world. You, God, are of course unique, and I have been selected. I am unique in my approach to monotheism and in my faith. Hodah shemi b'chol ha'olam, you've made my name known in the entire world. Va'aleh bincha la'olah, and God, you said to me, bring up my child to the altar as a sacrifice. Velo hirharti achar devarecha, and I didn't question your commandment. Velo ikavti ma'amarecha, and I didn't hold back from fulfilling it and from listening to what you said. Va'achshav, and now, ba'u mayim ad nafesh, now the water has come up to my neck and I'm about to drown in the river, meaning, God, what's this river doing here? I listened to you. I'm on my way. And suddenly this river appears. Im tovea Yitzchak b'ni, if my son Isaac drowns, heach yitached shimcha, how will we bring your name to the world? How will we make your name unique, God? How will we do what we're supposed to do, which is for your sake, God, if you don't allow us to cross this river? That's what Abraham says after the Satan turns himself into a river and prevents them from going forth. Miyad ga'ar HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Satan, God immediately rebuked the Satan, v'halachlo, and Satan left. And the river, I don't know how a river leaves. The river got out of the river, dried itself off, and walked away. If one could imagine a river picking up and walking away. And that's the Midrash. So why are we learning this? What does this have to do? I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting Midrash, how Satan dresses up as a river and tries to stop Abraham. Abraham prays to God and said, God, what is this river doing here? Let me continue to go and serve you. And God rebukes the river and the river leaves. Fascinating Midrash. What does it have to do with Rosh Hashanah? Any thoughts?
Oy.
Eventually Tashlich, but who knows?
Eventually, you said Tashlich?
Tashlich, because of the river.
Okay, so let's look at the Darchei Moshe, which is a halachic text. This is Rav Moshe Isserlis, the Ramah, who writes his next text, and he says, Katav HaMaharil. So the Maharil, who is a 14th and 15th century scholar from Mainz. So the Maharil says, Shenohagim, that the custom is Sheregilim Lalech El Hanar, that we usually go to the river, Volomar Tashuv Tirachamea. This is the ritual of Tashlich. This is the classic Jewish ritual of going to the water. Mishum De'ita. Why do we do it? Mishum De'ita b'Midrash, because it teaches in the Midrash, Zecher La'akedah, remembering the binding of Isaac, Sha'avar Abraham b'mayim, that Abraham passed the water on Tzavaro, was up to his neck. V'amar Hoshia, Kibao Mayim ad Nafesh, and he prayed to God, Ad Kan L'shono, V'kach Huba b'Minhagim. And this is recorded in the collection of customs of the Maharil. Ela Shehosif, and he added an additional reason. Sheroim Dagim Chayim, that you see living fish. Right? It's not enough just to see the carp in the bathtub. It's not just enough to see the fish on the table, the lox on the table, but you have to see the living fish. The Afshar Shehil Siman. Why? Because that's going to be a siman. That's going to be an omen. Shalot tishlot banu ayin hara, that we shouldn't have an ayin hara, the evil eye. Why not? The fish are associated with evil eye. So one interpretation is the Rishonim is actually a very interesting interpretation. Fish represent the escape from the evil eye. Why? Because where you're looking at the fish, if you look down in the water and you see a fish, you know what happens if you reach into the water to try to grab that fish? You miss. Because where you see the fish is not where the fish is, right? There's always that difference. So the evil eye cannot have dominion over fish, because where you see the fish is not exactly where the fish is. And also v'nifre v'nirbeh b'dagim, we should be fruitful and multiply like fish. So you have all these different approaches to why we're going to water. One having to do with the midrash, another having to do with the symbolism of fish. And then they have one more sentence here where he quotes, it's a very interesting sentence actually. He quotes the Talmud Yerushalmi, what we call the Palestinian Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud. The Rosh Hashana, that there's the concept that a person who sleeps on Rosh Hashana, that their good mazel will go to sleep as well, and therefore we are careful not to sleep or not to take a nap, not to sleep on Rosh Hashanah, not to sleep too much on Rosh Hashanah. But one thing is very interesting is that in our collection of the Talmud Yerushalmi, we don't have this line. This phrase doesn't exist. So that's something with the Talmud Yerushalmi. We have much less complete records of the Talmud Yerushalmi, and much of what we learn about the Talmud is from secondary citations of sections of the Talmud that have been lost over time. So this is, the halacha based on midrash the halacha. What's missing from the halacha? Anything you notice that from our observance of tashlich, which is not mentioned here? So the answer is breadcrumbs. Doesn't say anything about throwing bread into the water, which I think many associate as the principal concept of tashlich. So you have to look really hard in the halachic literature to find any mention of this. And most of the time, it's people bringing into question the validity of it. Why are we feeding wild animals on Yantiv? That's a prohibition against, and so on. It's halachically questionable to go out and feed wild animals on Yantiv. Why are we wasting bread? Why, and so on. But the core ritual is stemming from this midrash. I saw this beautiful poem, which I thought was really beautiful. This poem is from an Israeli writer, and the writer goes under the pen name of Adula, and that's when she writes for children. She writes under the pen name of Adula, and her actual name is Sabina Meseg, a contemporary Israeli writer. And I thought this is a beautiful poem that I wanted to share with you, called Tashlich, the ritual of throwing the bread into the water. She says, Lu yacholti pashut lashlich el hayam. If only I could simply throw to the sea, et kol hashtuyot shedibarti, all of the nonsense that I spoke, itam. Et kol hashtuyot, all of the nonsense, v'gam sheker katan, and all of the little lies, all of the white lies that I told, the little lies that I told. Lu amarli haketzef, if only the foam of the waves could say to me, Tanuach Yeldon, relax, little one. Zahaya rak bilbul, it was just a mix-up. Lo haya kan zadon, there was no evil intent. Mishum kach zenimchak, that's why it's all going to be erased. Zenishkach, it's going to be forgotten. Zemachul, it's forgiven. Mazeh sheker katan, what is a little lie? Shahaya rak bilbul, that was just a little misunderstanding. It was just a little muttering, not even anything significant. Bishvil yam, compared to a sea. Shemagia mikan va'ad chul, that reaches from here all the way until chutz la'aretz, chul, all the way until another country. What's a little? The rhyming is beautiful. Mazeh sheker katan shahaya rak bilbul. Bishvil yam shemagia mikan ve'ad chul. What is a little lie compared to a big ocean? That's what she's saying, which I think is also, this is a midrash in and of itself. She's saying, what tashlich, you're carrying your sins away, you're throwing your sins into the sea and carrying them away. This is really just, what is this? This is nothing compared to what the sea can do, to the power of the water, how extensive the water is. This is nothing compared to that. And then we'll close with the Aruch HaShulchan, who's a bit more contemporary. The Aruch HaShulchan, Yechiel Michal Halevi Epstein, and I just want to show his treatment of tashlich, which I think is a really interesting. He starts off. This is in halacha that's talking about Rosh Hashana afternoon. So tashlich is always going to be thrown in with the halacha of there are those yesh noagim, those have a custom not to sleep on the first day of Rosh Hashanah in the day. Don't take a nap. You come home from shul, you're exhausted. Don't take a nap. But and the Arizal and the holy Ari Yitzchak Luria said that after midday, the Achar Chatzot, Acharei Hatzkiyot, and after hearing the shofar, Yecholim Lishon, then you can sleep if it's after midday. Okay, so just a little parenthetical concept of not sleeping, but the Arizal says you can, and the Aruch HaShulchan points out a very important point: v'yoshev uvatel, that somebody who's sitting around doing nothing, ki yashen dami, it's as if they're sleeping. So don't think that you have to just keep yourself awake by sitting there and doing nothing. Either be productive, be industrious, learn, pray, use your time wisely, because somebody who sits around doing nothing is like a person who's sleeping. And now he gets to a very interesting concept of tashlich. He says, V'yesh nohagim. There are those who have the custom. And this should be surprising to us because tashlich for us is a widespread custom. This is, everyone does, you go down to the water, you throw your sins in it. This is part of our ritual observance of Rosh Hashana. And going back even a generation, the Aruch HaShulchan is saying, there are those who have the custom to go on the first day of Rosh Hashanah to the river and to say the verses of the Tashlich. This is the verse from Micah, from the prophet, that you should cast out. That's where Tashlich gets its name from the verse, the Tashlich, cast away to the depths of the sea all of our sins. And we call it Tashlich. And here's where he gets a bit what we might call it puritanical. V'yazhiru shelo yelchu nashim. Make sure women don't go. Why? Because you don't want women and men to mix. Uvimkomot sheholchot, and in places where women do go, mutab she'anashim lo yelchu klal. It's better that the men don't go at all. So he's saying, you want to know how strong this custom is? If it's going to lead to intermingling, don't do it. Just do away with it. Because even without this issue of the intermingling, which is not our concern in a contemporary community, but certainly was their concern in Europe in the 19th century, he's saying because without this, there are those who protest it nowadays anyway, and a lot of people don't do it because of reasons that are known to them, and that's the correct way, the Aruch HaShulchan says. So this is just one voice in a long line of halachic literature, of legal literature, which says, do not do tashlich. Do not go to the water. It's just a custom at best. Don't do it because of issues of throwing bread into the water. Don't do it because of theological issues of going to the rivers and what that means in terms of other religions and pagan religions that worship water in a particular way. Don't do it for a whole litany of reasons. Don't do it. Don't do it because the foundation of this ritual is what? Is a midrash. Midrash don't give us rituals. Midrash doesn't give us halacha. But this midrash does. Abraham and Isaac and the river and Satan dressed up as a river. There's actual halacha that comes from that. So the Aruch HaShulchan is one voice, but many, and there are a number of excellent articles that have been written about this, about the power of the people and the will of the people to define Jewish ritual, because you will be hard pressed to find a Jewish authority, a legal authority, who says, tashlich is really important. You really have to do it. It's an obligation. No one says that. People will say, this custom is there. People go to the water, they say these prayers, they throw bread into the water. Okay, go ahead and do it. But if you run into this problem of X, Y, or Z, don't do it. Don't do it at all. But it's become such an important part. I mean, part of my core Rosh Hashanah memories growing up. We're going to in Rochester, New York, we're going down to the reservoir, right down the block from the synagogue, and the whole Jewish community out there, and you'd see your friends, and you'd hang out, and you'd see how far you can throw the bread into the reservoir, and all the things that kids love to do. It was a gas. It was a lot of fun, and to see that this ritual has been criticized and to see the source of the ritual is very interesting on an academic level. But I think it's a very important ritual for our community, which will continue on the first day of Rosh Hashanah in the afternoon this year as well. Oro.
Yeah. So what does the Shulchan Aruch say about tashlich? That it's halacha that
no, it's minhag. Everyone says yesh nohagim, that there are those who have the custom. That's how it's being treated throughout.
Except that when a custom lasts for a number of years or centuries, it becomes law, right?
Yes, absolutely. You could branch into that territory, into minhag, the phrase minhag Yisrael halachahu, that the customs of Israel become halacha, become Jewish law, and have that strength. I don't know. I think this custom is probably widespread enough to have that applied to it, and I know even in places where there's no water. In my yeshiva in Israel, we were not near any natural we were on the top of a hill and there was nothing. So we went to the water silo on the top of the hill to the big water tank up there and said tashlich standing outside of this big metal container. That was our tashlich. It wasn't picturesque. It wasn't going down to the Saint Laurent. It wasn't going down to the sea. But it's the idea was there. The idea, and I think for me that taught me also that reframed tashlich for me. The idea that in yeshiva my tashlich was standing outside of a water tank and saying prayers, refocused it and said, you know what? This has nothing to do with throwing bread into water. This has nothing to do with standing at nature. This has to do with saying the words, God, please cast out my sins into the depths of the sea. And the water is here as a symbolic reminder of this prayer. It's not, it's not more than that.
So which is more of a minhag?
Sounds a little bit like praying to an idol.
Yeah, I think the more I talk about it, the more I really internalize the opposition to this custom over the years. Going down to the water and saying our prayers, that's not going down to the river. That's not what we do. But it's become a very strong and compelling minhag, and certainly watching the kids run around is very rewarding. So sometimes you make theological sacrifices for the sake of meaning and depth of tradition, which certainly is there in the tashlich ritual. David, you were going to say?
Which is more of a minhag, this or kitniot?
Oh wow, kitniot, much more of a minhag.
Much more minhag? Okay, that's good enough for me. Thank you.
Kitniot is a very strong minhag. The idea of not eating products that look like grain products on Pesach, which is Ashkenazi exclusively. I'm trying to think. I don't know if there are, whole parts of the Jewish community that don't do tashlich, similar to kitniot, where you're really divided as a community. I'm not familiar enough with other communities' tashlich rituals. Other than that, it's a fun ritual, so therefore it becomes a bit more widespread. Susan, you're muted.
Okay, here I am. Sorry. So it's been a while. Hello, Rabbi.
Hello.
Rabbi, it's symbolic. It's a symbolic gesture that we all take.
Yeah.
And hopefully God receives it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is a deeply symbolic gesture. One of the challenges is that we've taken the symbolism and we've given it such defined form in terms of when it's done, where it's done, and how it's done. And then it goes from being just a symbolic gesture into formalized
tradition.
And that is when it falls under the eyes or under the view of the rabbis who are saying, okay, now, if this were just happening at people's Shabbos tables or Yontif tables, okay, we could leave it alone. But now that it's part of the structure of a community, let's take a look at the theological underpinnings of this, at halachic problems that might be associated with it. Once it's on our letterhead, now we have to take it much more seriously. So anyway, I think it's a fascinating conversation also within the spectrum of midrash, of how a story about Abraham and a river gives birth, or at least I don't know if it gives birth, but at least maybe you're just retroactively applied to understanding this custom, and maybe we're looking back in the sources and trying to understand the reason, but at the very least it's understood by many to be the source of this custom. So we look today at a midrash on the Parasha Nitzavim, which took a list of people and made some pretty fantastic claims about the impact, the relationship of the people one to the other, about the impact of people to each other, and about how God looks at all the different groups of people as well, and looked at an interesting midrash related to the Akedah, which leads to a conversation about the ritual of Tashlich. And with that, we will wish everyone a Shana Tova Umituka, and may we all be written and inscribed into the book of life this coming year. And I hope your Rosh Hashanah is meaningful and inspiring. And if you find yourself at Shar HaShamayim, I look forward to seeing you there. And otherwise, we'll see each other next week, same time, same channel, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Special Aseret Yemei Tshuva, 10 Days of Repentance edition of Parsha Insights. Take care, everyone, and Shabbat
Thank you.
Shana Tova.
Thank you.